One important component of education is assessment. When you think of assessment, we're just thinking about testing or giving examination. So in schools, we give tests because we want to know where the students are. We want to know how much the students have learned. But when we test, there are things that we need to consider. There are principles that we need to adhere to for us to maintain high quality assessment. So our topic is about principles of high quality assessment. So I'd like you to think of a learner. So of course, as expected, the learner studied hard. And why do you think he did? Why do you think he studied? Because he planned to take the test. So he took the test. And then after a while, he learned that he passed the test. So after passing the test, there would be like a feeling of relief, a feeling of, say, celebration or happiness. However, the sad thing about testing after passing the test is that a student forgot what he learned. He even forgot the content of the test, and I think that's uh, a reality, one of the realities, a sad reality in education. So, to continue, let's talk about principles of high quality assessment. So, the first thing that we need to consider to maintain high quality assessment is the clarity of learning targets. The second is appropriateness of assessment methods, validity of the test, reliability of the test, then fairness, positive consequences of the test, practicality and efficiency, and of course ethics in assessment. Let's talk first about the clarity of learning targets. So why do we need to clarify our targets? Assessment can be made precise, accurate, dependable only if what are to be achieved are clearly stated and feasible. And targets involves knowledge, reasoning, skills, products, and affects, which are stated in behavioral terms. And these are something which can be observed through the behavior of the students. And when we think of cognitive targets, we think about Bloom's because he was the one who popularized the Bloom's taxonomy, of course, and it was revised, and we have 6 levels. We need to understand that in targeting the cognitive level, we need to make a balance in all of these levels. Sometimes our test is too shallow, that involves only simple recall, and we don't even ask the students to explain or do something or analyze. So there should be balance uh, among the 6 levels. So another is, what are we going to target? Are we going to test skills or competencies? And where do we base our targets? Of course, it's in the curriculum. So when you think of skills, these are specific activities or tasks that a student can proficiently do. So, and then competencies, these are cluster of skills, and we usually found this in the curriculum guide. And abilities made up of related competencies, and we can categorize these abilities as cognitive, affective, psychomotor. So when we say of cognitive, it's more on thinking; affective, it's more on feeling; and psychomotor, it's more on uh, the so-called, what do you call that? Psychomotor, meaning action or body works. Clarity of learning targets involves, when you say target, it involves products, outputs, and project targets. These are tangible and concrete evidence of students' ability, and it needs to be clearly specified, and uh, the level of workmanship of the project. So there should be some sort of criteria. So when we think of appropriateness of learning or assessment methods, knowing the target, knowing the learning target, we now have the method, how to test. So like for example, if your target is on writing, so what kind of assessment are you giving? If your target is on skills like in physical education, so what kind of assessment method are you going to give? So we talk about first written response instruments. So these are objective tests, and an example of objective tests are multiple choice, and we also have true or false test and matching type test. And these are appropriate for assessing the various levels of hierarchy of educational objectives. And we also have essays, which can test the student's grasp of higher level cognitive skills. And then we can also use checklists, in which we list several characteristics or activities presented to the subjects of the study or to the students, where they will analyze and place a mark opposite the characteristics. And usually these checklists are self-test. And then we also have the product rating skills. Usually when we ask our students to come up with a project, a tangible project, so we need to also provide them with the rating skills. And we also have the performance test. And of course, when we have performance test, we need to have the performance checklist. And it consists of a list of behaviors that make up a certain type of performance. And this is used to determine whether or not an individual behaves in a certain way when asked to complete a particular task. So meaning the methods must be appropriate depending on the target. Then we can also have oral questioning. So oral questioning is appropriate assessment method when the objects or objectives are to assess the student's top knowledge, or maybe to determine the student's ability to communicate ideas in coherent verbal sentences. Then we can also have observation and self-reports, and useful in supplementary methods when used in conjunction with oral questioning and performance tests. Now, so when we talk about methods of assessment, it's not only one method. We can use multiple methods at the same time. No, right? Now, talking about properties of assessment. So first, there should be clarity of learning targets, and then there should be appropriateness of assessment methods. Now, this time we look at the properties of assessment methods. First property is validity. Second is reliability. Then fairness. Then it should have positive consequences. It should be practical and efficient. And we also consider ethics in assessment. So when we say validity, something valid is something fair, of course. So a valid test is one that measures what it is supposed to measure. So a test is only valid if the test measures what it is supposed to measure. Then there are certain types of validity. First is the face validity, the outward appearance of the test, and this is the lowest form of test validity. And you can ask the question, what do students think of the test? Second is construct validity, in which the test is loaded in a construct or factor, meaning one question would be, are you testing the way you taught the content? Or am I testing in the way I taught the content? Meaning there should be some sort of alignment in the way you teach and the way you are going to test your students. Then we talk about content validity. So content is very simple. Are you testing what you were teaching? Meaning you cannot test what you did not teach. That's simple and clear. Then we also have the criterion related validity. So you're going to ask the question, how does this compare with the existing valid test? Sometimes when you give tests, the for a long time, for example, you give several tests. So how do you know that the test is valid? Like the test that you're giving today, or as compared to the test that you gave uh, several days ago. So meaning to say there should be some sort of comparison. And then when we say criterion related validity, so you're talking about the same specific, or you're talking about specific criterion. So if there is that kind of test, for example, about problem solving, and you give another test on problem solving with the same criterion, do you give or do you get the same result given the same group of students? Then talk about validity. We say that tests can be made more valid by making them more subjective, meaning open items. So why this is so? Why do you think subjective tests are more valid tests? So we'll learn later why. Then the test must be reliable, meaning the reliability of the test must be considered. So when you say reliability, this is the extent to which an experiment or test or any measuring procedure yields the same result on repeated trials. That's the general meaning of reliability. But when it comes to testing, when you give the same test over and over again, like how many trials with, of course, given after like how many days or how many weeks, more or less, you get the same result. So validity or reliability is something reliable, is something that works well and that you can trust. So you know it's reliable because you can trust. And a reliable test is a consistent measure of what it is supposed to measure. So as compared to validity, when you think of reliability, you ask the question, can we trust the result of the test? Would we get the same results if the tests were taken again and scored by a different person? So we also have equivalency reliability, which is the extent to which two items measure identical concepts at an identical level of difficulty. So equivalency reliability is determined by relating two sets of test scores to one another to highlight the degree of relationships or association. Usually this is done in research to test the reliability of the test, to compare the reliability of the test. So reliability, we also have stability reliability, meaning it should be classical. When we say classical, it should be the same, or it should stand with the test of time. So meaning uh, it's the agreement of measuring instrument over time. So that's reliability, or that's stability reliability. Internal consistency is the extent to which tests or procedures assess the same characteristic, skill, or quality. It is a measure of the precision between the observers or the measuring instruments used in the study. Like, for example, if I'm giving a test and I'm thinking of measuring the problem solving skills of the students, so what I am going to put in the instrument should be precise enough that when somebody will try to observe it, it should be there, meaning it should be reliable. Then we also have the inter-rater reliability. So inter-rater, talking about the rater, the one who give the score, for example, if there are two or three raters or scorers of the same test, more or less these three should have more or less the same the same perspective, or even though they are looking at it a different way, but when they give the score, it should more or less be consistent. And of course, the test must be fair. So fairness, so we say fairness, it's something that there should be no bias. So the concept that assessment should be fair covers a number of aspects. So one is the student knowledge and learning targets of assessment, meaning to say what are your targets? And the question is, do the students have that knowledge? So it's the same as, are you testing the one that you were teaching? So there should be fairness when what you teach is also what you are testing. Then opportunity to learn. So it is fair when the students are given the opportunity to learn what are to be tested. So meaning, if you give tests without giving them the opportunity to learn what are to be tested, that's not fair. Then of course you need to consider the prerequisite knowledge and skills of the students. And then we should avoid teacher stereotyping. Meaning, when we see teacher stereotype, because there are cases when we think of a teacher, we can always already think of the kind of test that he or she is going to give. So there's some sort of stereotyping. Like for example, this particular teacher, when he or she gives tests, it's very difficult. While this another teacher, she always give or he always have these very easy questions or very easy tests. Then we have to avoid bias in assessment, tasks, and procedures. So bias meaning everybody should have access to the task. Everybody should have the opportunity to do the procedure. It should not be There should be no inclination towards a particular group of students. So everybody should have the accessibility to the task and the procedure of the test. Then it should have positive consequences. Now, what do you mean by positive consequences? Sometimes there are cases in which, after taking the test, you have that very low feeling, as if you were so disappointed, and to the point that you no longer wanted to study. And that should not be the consequence of a high quality assessment. So learning assessments provide students with effective feedback and potentially improve their motivation or self-esteem. Moreover, assessments of learning gives students the tools to assess themselves and understand how to improve. So meaning, it's not about being discouraged after taking the test, but it should be about being encouraged after taking the test. And positive consequence on students, teachers, parents, and other stakeholders. So it's not only for the students, but for everyone, the teachers, the parents, and other stakeholders. And of course, high quality assessment should be practical and efficient. So, what is it? So, learning assessment provides students with effective feedback and potentially improve their motivation or self-esteem. And meaning to say that, terms of practicality, something practical is something effective in real situation. And a practical test is one which can be practically administered. And you can just ask these questions. Will the test take longer to design than apply? Well, sometimes it's very impractical because it took you a lot of time to design the test. Then if you give the test for a very short period of time, the students were able to finish the test. So, is it practical? Will the test be easy to mark? Like, for example, you should think of the method. If you give an essay test with 50 questions, do you think it's practical? Of course not. So it's not easy to mark. So tests can be made more practical by making it more objective and more controlled items. So meaning to say, objective tests are more practical. Practical because it's more practical to correct. Now another consideration when you think of practicality and efficiency of the test is of course the teacher familiarity with the method. Do you think the teacher is familiar with the method? Then what about the time required? The time required to design the test, to write the items, and of course, for the students to take the test or to finish the test. Then complexity of administration. It should be simple. It can be administered easily, and of course, there should be ease of scoring and ease of interpretation, and of course, it should not be very costly. So teachers should be familiar with the test, and it does not require too much time, and the test must be implementable. So we uh, are considering now that the teacher should always think of what should be the most practical. And when we say efficient, it should be uh, it's not only practical, but the teacher can with the required time, he is able to finish the design or writing the items and then checking the test or marking the test. So these three, reliability, validity, and practicality, sometimes it's difficult for these three to come together. Why? There's a problem. The more reliable a test is, the less valid it is. Why? When we say reliability, we're talking about objective tests, and when we say validity, we're talking about more open items. So what should we do to make a balance between these two? So it cannot be very reliable, but at the same time, it is less valid. Then the more valid a test is, the less reliable. And the more practical a test in general, it's less valid. When I say practical because it's easy to check, it's easy to mark, but it's not very valid. So what should be the solution? So the solution is we need a balance as in everything, in both exams and exam items. Right, and the last principle is ethics in assessment. Of course, ethical practice is very important, not only in assessment, but in all that you do in school as a teacher, like when you teach, when you give tests, so we need to practice ethics. So one consideration is informed consent, meaning your student should be aware of why he or she is taking the test. So it should be informed consent, meaning that your students are informed. And anonymity and confidentiality. Why? What is this? Now, there are cases in which, after taking the test, the teacher returned the papers. All right? So sometimes, instead of returning the papers individually to the concerned students, there are cases in which the teacher announced it in the whole class. Do you think it's ethical? Of course not, because we are not practicing confidentiality. So either in gathering the data, recording the data, and reporting the data. Like when we give tests, that's gathering the data. We record the score, and then we report the score. We don't. We should practice anonymity and confidentiality. Now, when we say ethics and assessment, this is about knowing what is right and what is wrong. And then we need to conform to the standards of conduct of a given profession or group. Like in teaching, there should be some ethical practice. Then ethical issues that may be raised, like possible harm to your students and confidentiality and presence of concealment or deception, meaning you deceive your students. Sometimes it's we instead of giving them the right information about the test, we sometimes conceal some like issues. And then, of course, sometimes the teacher is tempted to assist the students. Now, there are cases when during the test, one or few of your students will come to you and ask about a particular item. The student might not be asking the answer to the question, but he or she is trying to ask for hints from the teacher. Or maybe there are cases in which a student will try to ask few questions regarding uh, the direction. So what you will do? So instead of talking to that particular student, you need to discuss it to everyone. So if a student is asking about like a particular item, so you need to discuss it to everyone instead of discussing that particular item your to that particular student. So that's it. So that's all for today. I hope you learned about principles of high quality assessment. That's all, and thank you.